What's poppin', people? It's Dante going for my morning walk here in Fairmount Park, Philadelphia. Welcome to the GoPro vlog. And today's thought is, your next photo is your best photo. So essentially, I adopt this life-affirming mindset where every photo I make is my best photo. And why do I think this way? I think ultimately there's no such thing as good or bad photos, but only new photos to make. And so what that means is, in order to improve your photography, in order to take your photography to the next level, one must let go. One must let go of all preconceived ideas about what makes or breaks a good or bad photograph, or what's out there in the world generally, right? And so one of the things I like to do is to slow down, to watch the squirrel in the way that it jumps across from tree to tree, to observe the different patterns in nature and human behavior, whether I'm looking at the light, the birds in flight, the people and the way they move and gesture upon the street. You know, when I'm looking at the world around me, there's so many infinite complexities. There's these beautiful trees, and then from the trees we have leaves, and they grow and they wither and they die and reborn again. And there's this cycle of life that's so intriguing to me. And I feel as though through that recognition of patterns in life, you know, we can actually unlock this abundant mindset and approach to our photography where everything is photographable and infinitely interesting. And there's no such thing as boredom in my life, as I have this keen observation skill of recognizing these patterns. You know, when you look at the trees and the way they're tall and looming, the branches mimic the lungs within your body, and the trees produce leaves, and upon those leaves there's these beautiful veins that form, and these veins that form on the leaves are very similar to the veins within our body, and the way in which the blood pumps through our body provides us life, provides us energy. You know, and I find that when I look at life this way and all of its infinite complexities, it reminds me that there's infinite ways to photograph things, where I'm not out there on the hunt looking for my next best photo. I'm not out there in the world looking for anything, really. I'm just out here living my everyday life, bringing my camera for the ride, and responding to the moments that come towards me. And I think this is the best place to be in terms of practicing daily street photography, where we don't want to get bogged down by our location, by our daily routine. You know, where the life that we live, you know, it's not necessarily what it seems. And I think through photographing, you can uncover the inner, deeper meaning beyond the surface, and I think crack at the root of what it means to experience life. And to me, this is such an abundant feeling that I get. I feel as though through photography, my life becomes enriched with meaning. And so by adopting a life-affirming mindset to my practice, by going out here each day with daily consistency, despite how mundane things may seem, I always find something to uplift in a photograph, where the goal of the street photographer is simply to remain curious. And through our curiosity, we can find infinite ways to articulate the unknown, to put order to the chaos, where the chaos of life is out of our control. But through the act of making a photograph, you can control that chaos. You can find your voice, and you can give yourself this superpower through the medium of photography, through quite literally giving yourself a voice. You know, when you look at the word photography, phos meaning light, graphia meaning writing or drawing, you're writing with light, you're drawing with light, you're creating instant sketches of life. And this to me is the superpower of photography. It's the ability to provide the photographer the voice, right? Where you may feel like you have nothing to say today, but when you go out there and you embrace the spirit of play and you photograph your way through life, I believe your voice will naturally reveal itself through the photographs you make. And so by letting go and detaching yourself from the outcome, from the results, from what you deem to be success in photography, you will enter a flow state. You will enter what I like to think of as the stream of becoming, where your next photograph is your best photograph. And, you know, just as a side note and an idea to hone in on is, through this life affirmation and through this positive attitude, you can go out there and make photographs that may seem absolutely unreal. You know, through my practice traveling throughout the world for the past decade, I've made so many photographs that may seem like they were made through luck, but through being prepared and always being there with your camera in hand and being ready to press the shutter, you can essentially increase your chances of making these lucky photographs. You know, I think of my time in Mumbai, observing the way in which the birds fly, observing the patterns of the people and the way they moved upon Bandar Fort, putting order to that chaotic scene. I think about the time I was climbing the top of Mexico City, not really expecting anything, but then having this sculpture of Jesus reveal itself to me and making a relationship between the man in the foreground and the way his arms are outstretched in relationship to that repeated gesture of Jesus in the background. Or my time here in my hometown in Philadelphia, out there in Logan Square, photographing endlessly for a few hours straight, observing the patterns of light, observing the people and the way they're playing upon the sculptures, observing the way the rainbow reveals itself at that particular position at that particular time, and then going forward with curiosity and courage, you know, to the front lines of that scene and making sense of this chaotic environment and putting order to it within my frames and revealing back in the photograph this spontaneous moment, this rainbow that reveals itself, this seemingly lucky moment that came through repetition, through pattern recognition, and through going out there with consistency and a life-affirming mindset. You know, for when I was photographing these different situations, I affirmed in my head and I said out loud that I will photograph this rainbow, that I'm looking for that bird in flight, that I can make this relationship between Jesus and the men at the scene in Mexico. And then putting that mindset to practice, you can do anything. I think ultimately the beauty of photography is the spontaneity. You know, the beauty of practicing photography daily is the stream of becoming through making new photographs. And so just remind yourself that there's no such thing as good or bad photographs. There's only new photographs. And through that, you will have an abundant mindset of production and enter a flow state of effortless action where the life in front of you isn't what it seems. And through photographing, you can uncover, I believe, the soul of the street and the soul of yourself, the soul of the photographer, the artist will be revealed in the photographs you make. For ultimately, photography has nothing to do with photography, but it has everything to do with the way in which you engage with humanity out there in the open world, exploring endlessly. And so I encourage you to walk. I encourage you to explore. I encourage you to tap into that childlike curiosity that you possess. You know, we were all born artists, and then the modern world sort of sucks it out of you. But if you tap back into that inner childlike spirit of play, these kind of moments and photographs you're hoping to make will come effortlessly. And so remember to simply go slow and let life flow towards you. And then you're there and you're prepared with your camera in hand, ready to press the shutter, ready to make these different relationships between you, the subject, and the background, putting together a composition through your intuition. You know, the stream of becoming is such a beautiful notion because it reminds me that photography is endless and this world is infinite. There's so much to see. There's so much to explore, to do, and to photograph. And so remind yourself each and every day that the next time you click the shutter is your next best frame. Macro mode. Put the bag down. Drop low. Point and shoot.